Rock album criticism is a genre of little interest. Everything has long been retold, written, and worn out on social networks. Discussions about nothing are generated. On the internet, lists appear, 200 greatest albums of all time, and other things of that kind. In reality, only 15 to 20 albums can claim to be truly worthy of attention. A special place in such lists is occupied by only 3 albums whose significance goes far beyond genre boundaries. These albums explore unsolvable questions of the structure of the world and cosmology, questions to which there are no answers or which lie beyond human understanding. The circumstances of the creation of these albums are in no way connected. They were created by different artists in the early 1970s. However, taken together, these albums formed a stable triad. The first of these 3 albums is 666 by Aphrodite's Child. We will not analyze the structure of the album. This has already been done by other critics. They have noted that in 666 the revelation is presented as a psychedelic ritual, burdened with avant-garde excess and excessively stretched in time. Nevertheless, they interpreted the album as one of the most significant works in the history of progressive rock. This album is, first and foremost, a philosophical work that goes beyond rock music. It is enough to listen to the album once, even without knowing English, to understand, or at least guess, what it is about. Everything is already happening now. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have already broken free from myth and are racing across the planet, bringing us closer to the doomsday. In the very first track, the existing system is rejected. Babylon, symbolizing the modern world, collapses. The system no longer exists. But what remains? A banal hippie commune? A new old system based on the principles of primitive communal society? Any system built by humans from within, whether a state, a religious community, or something else, carries systemic error embedded in human DNA by original sin, as well as many other acquired errors, unnoticed by its creators, but emerging during the development of such a system. Even democratic states, the most advanced systems created by humans, exist in a constant state of instability and recurring crises leading to their destruction. In one country, laws allow a criminal to be elected president. In another, corrupt leaders attempt to create a controlled Frankenstein president and conduct their schemes behind his emaciated back. But the monster breaks free from the test tube, usurps power, and destroys his creators. Systems are cracking at the seams. Babylon is about to fall. But let's return to the album. Its development is divided into 2 parallel streams: inarticulately proclaimed anti-system rebellion, and the main narrative interpreting the apocalypse. This is not direct action, but a speculative picture, like a film in a cinema. All tickets are sold, all seats are occupied, and no spectator can refuse to watch. This is no longer a spectacle, but a demonstration of another, perfect system, created not by humans, but by someone existing beyond the system and beyond human understanding. The apocalypse comes to everyone, as a permanent trial in Franz Kafka's novel The Trial. Every person is a hero of his own novel life. He is doomed from birth and cannot be acquitted. The apocalypse is a conveyor belt. It is an ideal system. It works in harmony and without error. People, those living now, those already dead, and those not yet born, pass through this perfect conveyor simultaneously, from birth to the last judgment. The point of reference here is not specific dates, but the day of judgment and the resurrection of the dead. This system is created in other spheres and is inaccessible to our understanding. And now the film ends. The album has finished sounding. Life continues in its own dimension, with its own troubles and joys, and we do not wish to see the 4 horsemen racing forward at full gallop. As I stated in my previous review, out of the uncountable mass of rock music, only 15 to 20 albums can truly claim to be worthy of serious attention. A special place in such a list is occupied by just 3 albums whose significance goes far beyond genre boundaries. These albums explore insoluble questions of the structure of the world and cosmology, questions to which no answers exist or which lie beyond human understanding. Taken together, these albums form a stable triad. The first of them was 666 by Aphrodite's Child. The second is A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis. The album is heard in a single breath from beginning to end. It is a true transcendental journey, and precisely the state defines psychedelic music. To understand such music, one must know how to listen to it. This journey is purely mental. It unfolds almost at the level of the subconscious, and the sensations it produces are impossible to convey in words. Very few bands have managed to reach such a level of perfection. This double album is undoubtedly the greatest achievement of Genesis during the Peter Gabriel era. The libretto, written largely by Gabriel himself, is constructed from fragments of his personal nightmare dreams. It is the most complete work the band could possibly have created, a point beyond which further improvement was simply impossible. In such situations, bands usually disintegrate, which is essentially what happened. Genesis under Phil Collins is already a pitiful wounded bird, flapping damaged wings, gradually losing altitude and sinking into the stagnant swamp of commercial pop music. At first acquaintance with the album, the listener is haunted by a feeling of contradiction. At first glance, the album title does not correspond to its content. The word lamb is associated with the concept of the Lamb of God, and the listener expects the development of a grand and meaningful theme. However, throughout the entire narrative, the lamb simply lies on Broadway, taking no action whatsoever. Within the album's context, New York and Broadway occupy the entire stage space. There is nothing left beyond them. This grotesque New York is a completed system created by human beings, containing within itself all the errors embedded in human DNA damaged by original sin, together with all the errors accumulated by the system itself. When there is no space or idea for further development, any system can only degrade. This system is no longer a conveyor. It is static and dead, omnipresent, surrounding you everywhere and always, constantly present, much like Solaris by Stanislav Lem. There is no hope here, no religion, no place for a temple, because the system itself has already become a kind of temple of trade and vice. There is nowhere left to drive the merchants out to, and there is no free space anywhere in this pathological universe. Only the lamb lies there, quietly observing what is happening. The action develops rapidly from the very first track. Out of a tunnel emerges the main character, a Puerto Rican named Rael, a young member of the New York criminal gang, armed with a spray can. After a brief walk, he suddenly finds himself in a surreal space where he undergoes a series of displacements and metamorphoses, ultimately turning into a monster, a sleeper man. Soon it becomes clear that all his friends and accomplices are following the same path of irreversible, stereotypical transformations. Among them is Rael's brother John, who turns out to be his exact copy, a mere reflection, or perhaps Rael himself. Everything that happens to them is merely a routine process of the system, the processing of products according to a fixed template. At the end of this merciless cycle, Rael appears before the listener as a fully completed freak, with absolutely no hope of reversal. Everything is finished, and it is utterly hopeless. The protagonist is akin to Gregor Samsa from the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, who turned into an insect, a transformation likewise caused by the influence of a certain system that is always invisibly present, a merciless system built by human beings, in which every person is a wandering portrait of Dorian Gray. In 666 by Aphrodite's Child, the apocalypse is presented as a perfectly functioning system. In Genesis's double album, the system is static, and the hero is shown as a standard process product, step by step, until the process is fully completed. Any system created by human beings, including states, is far from perfect and passes through all stages of natural development, from birth to stagnation and degradation. As a result, at the top of a degraded system stand modern Caligulas, leading their citizens into new gulags through war's extermination. Fortunately, we still have democracy, not perfect, but a self-repairing system. Today, the majority of people in the free part of the world perceive democracy as something eternal, granted once and for all, forgetting that it must be defended every single day. It is easier to enjoy life irresponsibly, failing to notice how you yourself could become a product, thrown into a reborn post-democratic and merciless, now totalitarian system for further processing. The Lamb no longer lies on Broadway. In the previous two reviews, I discussed the first two elements of a peculiar triad of the most important albums in rock music. The first album of the triad, 666 by Aphrodite's Child, presents the apocalypse as a perfect system existing beyond human understanding. The second, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis, examines the human world itself as a closed and degrading system, a conveyor that processes individuals into standardized products. The third and perhaps the most important album of the triad is Galactic Zoo Dossier by Arthur Brown's Kingdom Come, an album that goes far beyond any genre and even beyond music itself. Brown's work attempts something far more mystical and unexplored. It dares to speculate about what might exist behind the system itself, and who, if anyone, created it. One should not be surprised by the standard ritual of music critics approaching the album with their little field kits of comparisons and safety labels. Hawkwind here, Zappa there, a bit of Gentle Giant, perhaps a sprinkle of Pink Floyd, all carefully arranged like butterflies pinned to a board. With solemn authority, they announce that the album is chaotic, fragmentary, wacky, insufficiently cohesive, occasionally brilliant but flawed. The usual museum tags applied to something they clearly do not understand. It becomes simply ridiculous when such experts try to force everything into classifications they themselves invented: prog, space rock, metal, and so on. None of these categories even existed in 1971. Gentlemen, what exactly are you doing? You sound like a tribe of archaeologists who have stumbled upon a laptop in the jungle and are now hitting it with stone hammers while debating whether it resembles a coconut, a turtle shell, or perhaps a slightly advanced type of drum. The fragments you describe so diligently are not defects in the machine. They merely reveal the limits of the tools you are using to open it, and even more clearly, the limits of your education and imagination. This album is one indivisible piece of music that cannot be dissected into separate songs. Doing so would be like breaking a fresco by Michelangelo into fragments. Just look at the vinyl. There are no pauses between the tracks. One of these self-appointed critics even went so far as to pull the song trouble out of context and attack Kingdom Come guitarist Andy Dalby, calling a reject cut with badly written lyrics. Hands off Andy Dalby. This is a great piece. It is a diagnosis of the hippie utopia, those naive dreamers detached from reality. I would like to write a song to tell the world what is wrong with it today. I would like to write a book, if that were all it took, to make its troubles go away. The very essence of that entire movement is expressed here in just a few lines. Yes, such a song truly exists, and Andy Dalby has already written it. But the song cannot be torn from its context. Within the harsh reality of Galactic Zoo Dossier, it becomes something entirely different, a funeral march for the hippie movement, perfectly aligned with the album's darker philosophical direction. In this sense, Kingdom Come appear almost like the funeral band for the hippie era itself. The album opens with Internal Messenger, which clearly formulates the eternal question: where are we, the inhabitants of this galactic zoo, going, and who are we? It is a flawless philosophical piece. Nevertheless, I will remain faithful to my principle. I will not dissect the album any further. Those who have not heard it, listen to it yourselves. I cannot say whether you are able, within the so-called chaos of creation, to hear the proto-language that Arthur Brown may be using, perhaps subconsciously and without full awareness. And that sound, may well be the very word that stood at the beginning of everything. In the first act of cosmic creation, Unlike the previously mentioned albums of the triad, where the system itself occupies the center of attention, Galactic Zoo Dossier shifts the perspective outward. The listener is placed in the position of an observer, examining the inhabitants of the limited space behind the cage, Earth. The album therefore resembles a field report, a dossier compiled during an expedition into the peculiar ecosystem known as human civilization. Seen from a sufficiently distant vantage point, humanity indeed begins to resemble a species of animals placed inside an artificial environment. Their behavior appears repetitive and predictable. They construct systems, worship those systems, rebel against them, and then construct new ones containing exactly the same structural errors as the previous versions. From this viewpoint, the great political, ideological, and religious dramas of human history begin to resemble the daily routine of zoo inhabitants walking endlessly along the same paths inside their enclosures. The most unsettling aspect of Brown's work lies precisely here, the suspicion that the system itself might also be part of a larger system, one that remains invisible to those living inside it. If 666 demonstrates the existence of a perfect cosmic order, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway reveals the flawed mechanisms of human systems, Galactic Zoo Dossier raises the ultimate question. Are we merely observing the system? Or are we ourselves part of an experiment conducted from somewhere beyond it? The album offers no resolution. The dossier remains open. Arthur Brown is the Voltaire of rock music, and Galactic Zoo Dossier is the Candide of psychedelic rock. In 1,000 years, when only ruins remain of our civilization, archaeologists of the future will discover something resembling the Antikythera mechanism, a miraculously preserved ancient analog computer created with technologies unknown to their time. It will be a decayed vinyl record. No, not Pink Floyd. Scientists will reconstruct the sound, and they will be astonished how such a prophetic and perfect work could have been created in the distant dark ages of failed civilization.